Let's talk about one of the most perplexing alliances in modern geopolitics, the one between the United States and Pakistan. Because, on the surface, it makes absolutely zero sense.
Okay, let's just dive right into the heart of the paradox. On one side, you have the United States, whose #1 global mission for the last 20-plus years has been fighting terrorism. But then, on the other side, its key ally in that fight is a country that's widely known to be a safe haven for the very groups the U.S. is trying to stop. How does that work?
Now, you might think this is just an oversight, but it's really not. Washington has known about this glaring contradiction for decades. This alliance was never really built on shared values or trust. It was always about cold, hard strategic calculations that, as we're about to see, have consistently won out over everything else.
So how did we even get here? To really get a grip on the present, we've got to look back. This whole complicated relationship was actually kicked off during the Cold War. The original idea was pretty simple. Use Pakistan as a wall to block Soviet influence in the region.
But then 9/11 happens, and things get even weirder. Even with blinking red lights and tons of evidence that leaders from the Taliban and al-Qaeda were hiding out in Pakistan, what does Washington do? It gives Islamabad this special status as a major non-NATO ally, and that designation, well, it opened the floodgates for money and military gear.
And we are not talking about small change here. We're talking billions of dollars in what were called coalition support funds. Plus, they got top-tier military hardware like F-16 fighter jets. The official story was that this was all necessary for counterterrorism cooperation. But then, of course, Osama bin Laden was found living comfortably in a compound in Abbottabad, which just laid the duplicity bare for the whole world to see.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What is the actual evidence that makes this whole alliance so controversial and has so many people shaking their heads?
When you just lay out the timeline, a really disturbing pattern starts to pop out. Sources link Pakistani-backed groups to a whole laundry list of deadly attacks, from the 2001 assault on the Indian parliament to the horrific Mumbai attacks in 2008. Heck, even the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP, has been behind suicide bombings inside Pakistan's own capital city.
And get this, we're not just talking about militant groups hiding out in the mountains. The impunity is just staggering. The source material points to political figures who openly, publicly, brag about orchestrating violence abroad. When you've got people making these kinds of claims out in the open, well, it tells you that the state, at a minimum, is okay with it.
And it's not just the proxy groups. The Pakistani military itself has been in the hot seat. Human rights organizations have pointed to things like indiscriminate shelling in tribal areas and people being forced from their homes during military campaigns. And then across the line of control in Kashmir, there are accusations of deliberately shelling civilian areas. It really blurs the line between a military operation and state-sponsored terror.
Which, of course, brings us right back to the central question. You're probably asking, with all of this piling up, why on earth would the U.S. continue to see Pakistan as a partner worth supporting? The answer, as always, comes down to strategy. All right, this is where we get to the why. This is the part of the U.S. playbook that has guided Washington's thinking through all of this, no matter how contradictory it all seems on the surface. It really all boils down to these three things. Three big geopolitical necessities that seem to trump everything else. For the U.S., Pakistan has been the lifeline for Afghanistan, a check on India's power, and a way to keep China from getting too cozy in the region. First up, Afghanistan. Think about it. Afghanistan is landlocked. For 20 years, the American war effort there desperately needed a supply line. Pakistan's airspace and its ground routes were literally the arteries that kept the entire U.S. and NATO mission alive. It was unreliable, sure, but without it, the cost in lives and money would have been just astronomical. Second, you have the India factor. In the grand chess game of South Asia, Washington has always seen a strong Pakistani military as a useful way to balance out India. The thinking goes that it's better for U.S. interests if no single country completely dominates the region, even if that means funding and arming a pretty difficult ally to maintain that balance.
And finally, number 3, the elephant in the room, China. Pakistan and China have what they call an all-weather friendship, and that is a massive concern for the U.S., especially now with the China-Pakistan economic corridor giving Beijing a direct route to the Arabian Sea. So U.S. aid is basically seen as the only way to keep a foot in the door and prevent Islamabad from becoming a full-blown strategic asset for Beijing.
So when you add all that up, Afghanistan, India, China, what do you get? You get a policy that looks a whole lot like a double standard, a massive inconsistency in how America deals with the world.
Just look at this comparison. It is night and day. On one side, you have a country like Iran, which gets hit with crippling sanctions over its alleged ties to terror. On the other, You have Pakistan, with overwhelming evidence of its agencies sheltering the Taliban and other groups, and what's the consequence? Billions in aid and that special military status.
So what does this tell us? It says that, at the end of the day, this isn't really about a consistent moral principle. It's about expediency. It's about what's convenient. Publicly, the talk is all tough on terror, but privately, the checks keep getting written.
But this kind of pragmatism, it has a cost, right? So what is the real price the US and the world pay for playing this complicated, contradictory game?
Well, here's the kicker. This entire strategy, designed for short-term strategic gain, ends up shooting the U.S. in the foot long-term. It damages America's credibility, it erodes its moral authority. By propping up a state that plays both sides, the U.S. has, in a way, helped sustain the very terror networks it claims it wants to destroy.
And all of this leaves us with one really uncomfortable question to think about. Is the real goal of the war on terror to actually defeat terrorism once and for all? Or is it simply to manage the threat in a way that best serves America's other, bigger geopolitical interests? It's a question this whole messy alliance forces us to ask.